A German field mechanic could recognize a miracle of engineering by touch. The polished linkage, the tight carburetor settings, the cast iron block packed into the rear of a Panther like a cathedral organ. And then, in 1944, he looked into the back of an American Sherman and saw something that looked almost insulting. Not elegant, not sacred, not even properly neat. Belts ran everywhere. Hoses crossed the bay. Some versions looked as if Detroit had bolted half a neighborhood garage into one armored box. But that was the part Germany misunderstood. The Sherman's engine compartment was not designed to impress a master mechanic in a clean workshop. It was designed for a 19-year-old with muddy sleeves, a socket wrench, and shells landing close enough to shake dirt off the hedgerows. And in the war that actually happened, that difference mattered more than beauty, because World War II did not ask which tank engine looked best on a drawing board. It asked a colder question. When the engine dies in the mud tonight, will this tank be fighting again by morning? To understand why the answer terrified German mechanics, you have to begin with the machine they were trying to keep alive. The German Panther and Tiger were built around a philosophy of controlled excellence. Their Maybach engines were powerful, complex, and carefully machined. The Panther's HL-230 was a 23-liter, 700-horsepower monster, a compact block of power forced to move a heavy, demanding tank through terrain that treated machinery like prey. On paper, it was impressive. In a factory test bay, with proper fuel, clean filters, trained hands, and enough time, it could look like exactly what German engineering claimed to be. But the Eastern Front did not resemble a factory test bay. Neither did Normandy. Neither did Italy. Neither did the frozen roads where tank crews slept in their clothes, because stopping too long meant never moving again. Dust worked into air filters. Mud clung to running gear. Replacement fuel quality dropped. Crews pushed engines harder than designers wanted because the alternative was being left behind. The tighter the machine, the less it forgave. A small contamination problem became heat. Heat became a fire risk. A small adjustment problem became a dead tank. And a dead German heavy tank was rarely just a repair job. It became a recovery problem. First, the crew had to get the vehicle out of danger. That alone could be a nightmare. A Panther or Tiger was not a broken truck sitting politely by the roadside. It was a wounded armored vehicle, often stranded near enemy fire, often damaged in places that made towing difficult. Then came the weight. Then came the lack of proper recovery vehicles. Then came the road. Then came the depot. And if the lower hull or suspension had been hit, German mechanics could spend hours just fighting their way through interleaved road wheels before they ever reached the problem they actually needed to solve. The engine bay itself was no gift. Major work on a Maybach meant space, tools, lifting gear, experienced mechanics, and patience. War gave them very little of any of those things. To change an engine properly, the tank often had to be dragged away from the front, pulled into a repair area, opened up with heavy equipment, and worked on by men who knew exactly how to handle a specialized machine. That could take days. Not a dramatic day. Not a long afternoon. Days. And a tank that needs 3 or 4 days behind the line is not just absent from the next attack. It is absent from the next counterattack, the next retreat, the next sudden order in the dark. The next moment when the front moves and nobody has time to recover what was left behind. That was the hidden tax of perfection. Germany built engines that demanded respect. The battlefield did not respect them back. America entered the armored war with the opposite problem. It did not have a mature tank engine tradition waiting in a perfect row of factories. After Pearl Harbor, the United States needed tanks immediately. It needed them for its own expanding army. For Britain, for distant theaters, for a war that was eating machines faster than designers could draw clean solutions. So the Americans did something that looked chaotic from the outside. They went to the industries they already had. Detroit. Aviation plants, automotive lines, factories that knew how to build parts by the thousands and teach ordinary men how to service them. The order was not elegant. It was practical. Use what exists. Make it fit. Make it repeatable. Make it repairable. Then build so many that the enemy cannot breathe between replacements. That is why the Sherman family ended up with a strange zoo of engines. Some carried radial aircraft engines, which helped give early Shermans their tall profile. Some used General Motors diesels, favored in certain versions and sent across oceans to allies. And then there were the two power plants that made German logic stutter, the Chrysler A57 Multibank and the Ford GAA. The Chrysler engine looked, at first glance, like an engineering confession. Chrysler did not have one big purpose-built tank engine ready to go. What it had was a dependable civilian flathead six-cylinder engine, the kind of engine built for ordinary American cars, ordinary American roads, and ordinary American owners who expected the thing to start again on Monday. So Chrysler took 5 of those engines and made one tank engine out of them. 5 blocks arranged around a common drive. 30 cylinders, 5 carburetors, 5 water pumps, 5 ignition systems. A whole nest of linkages, pipes, belts, and mechanical compromise. To a German engineer trained to worship integrated precision, it looked ridiculous. Like an engine designed by committee during a thunderstorm. But ridicule is cheap, reliability is expensive, and Chrysler had accidentally created something war understood very well. A machine made from familiar parts, built on an industrial base that already knew how to make them, and serviceable by mechanics who did not need to be artists. The tolerances were not delicate in the German sense. The components were not rare. The knowledge was not locked inside a tiny cast of specialists. A man who understood civilian Chrysler engines was not staring at an alien object. He was staring at 5 known problems arranged in a very strange circle. And even stranger, the thing could take abuse. It was heavy, it was loud, it was complicated to describe, but it did not behave like a fragile masterpiece. It behaved like industrial improvisation with a temper. If one section was damaged badly enough, the design offered ways to isolate trouble and keep the vehicle from becoming instantly useless. It was not graceful. It was survival-minded. That mattered. Because the Sherman was never supposed to win by being worshipped in a mechanic's notebook. It was supposed to keep moving. The Ford GAA showed the same American philosophy from a different direction. Where the Chrysler Multibank looked like madness turned useful, the Ford GAA looked like industrial confidence with no apology. Ford had started from aviation ambition. The design came from work on a large aircraft engine. When that path changed, the idea was cut down into a tank engine, a big, naturally aspirated V8 with dual overhead cams, around 500 horsepower, and tremendous torque. But the shock was not only power, it was material. German industry was fighting a war with shortages pressing in from every direction. Aluminum was precious. It belonged in aircraft. It was rationed, guarded, argued over. Then German observers looked at American tanks and saw engines using aluminum blocks, as if the United States had simply decided scarcity was a problem for other people. That was not just engineering. It was a message. America could afford to put strategic material into a medium tank by the thousands. Not because each tank was precious, because the system behind it was enormous. Still, the greatest insult was not the aluminum. It was how casually the Americans expected the engine to come out. German repair culture treated the engine as the heart of a complicated animal. You worked your way toward it with skill and caution. You opened, adjusted, tuned, reached, removed, measured, and prayed the parts arriving from the rear actually matched the model in front of you. American designers looked at the same battlefield problem and asked a simpler question. Why fix the heart in the mud when you can pull the heart out and put another one in? The Sherman's rear end was built around access. Large engine doors opened wide. Connections were made with field service in mind. Components were grouped so the engine could be treated less like a sacred interior mechanism and more like a replaceable unit. A dead tank did not automatically have to vanish into the repair system for days. An armored maintenance crew could come forward with a recovery vehicle, swing an A-frame crane over the rear deck, disconnect fuel lines, mounts, and drive connections, and pull the ruined engine out as a package. Then came the part that broke German expectations. A new engine did not have to be invented on the spot. It did not have to be coaxed into existence by a master craftsman. It could arrive in a crate, greased, packed, standardized, waiting. The mechanics lowered it into the bay, bolted it down, reconnected what needed reconnecting, filled what needed filling, and tested it. A job that could swallow days in the German system could often be done by American maintenance units in a handful of hours. Not because American boys were magically better mechanics. Because the machine had been designed to forgive them. Because the supply chain had been designed to surround them. Because the war had been understood as a race against time, not a contest of elegance. That is the part the Germans could not solve by making a better carburetor. When a German mechanic needed a specific Maybach part, he was not just asking for metal. He was asking for a functioning factory, a surviving railway, a fuel allocation, a truck that had not been bombed, a depot not already overwhelmed, a part that matched the exact production variation in front of him. Every step was a chance for delay. Every delay was measured in empty space on the front line. The American mechanic lived in a different universe. He opened a crate with a part number on it. That sounds boring. It was devastating. A piston fit because it had been built to fit. A pump arrived because another ship had crossed the Atlantic full of pumps. An engine could be swapped because the next engine had already been manufactured before the current one failed. The broken unit did not have to die where it sat. It could be pulled, sent back, rebuilt, reissued, and returned to the system while the tank itself moved on with a fresh engine already in place. That was the Sherman's real weapon. Not the thickest armor, not the most feared gun, not the most elegant engine. Time. A German crew might knock out several Shermans in a hard fight and believe, reasonably, that those vehicles were gone for the next engagement. They had seen tracks broken, engines smoking, rear decks opened, crews bailing out. They knew what that meant in their own army. It meant paperwork, recovery, shortage, special tools, days. Then the next morning, through binoculars, they could see Shermans coming forward again. Maybe not the exact same vehicle every time. Maybe repaired, replaced, cannibalized, or swapped back into line. But to the men facing them, the effect was almost supernatural. They had hurt the machine. The machine had returned. That kind of reliability is not glamorous in a war story. It does not look as dramatic as a duel between a Tiger and a Sherman at the edge of a village. It does not fit easily on a propaganda poster. But wars of industry are won inside moments that look boring from a distance. A mechanic tightening the last bolt in the rain. A crane lifting an engine clear of an armored hull. A dock worker loading another crate. A factory line stamping another part so precisely ordinary that nobody remembers his name. The German system chased superiority inside the machine. The American system chased return speed around the machine. That distinction changed everything. Because a battlefield is not a showroom. It is a place where mud gets into the plan, where tired teenagers make mistakes, where fuel is dirty, where the best tank in the world becomes scrap if it cannot be reached, lifted, opened, fed, and returned before the tactical map changes. A machine that performs beautifully for one day and disappears for 4 has a different value than a machine that performs adequately, breaks, and comes back before sunrise. That was the brutal arithmetic. German engineers had built engines that proved what expert hands could create. American industry built engine compartments that proved something colder. You do not have to make every tank immortal. You only have to make sure death does not last. So when German mechanics looked into the Sherman, the shock was not that it was crude. The shock was that its crudeness had a purpose. The odd engine choices, the wide open access, the standardized parts, the recovery vehicles, the crates, the teenage mechanics, the willingness to replace instead of worship. All of it formed a weapon no single tank duel could explain. A weapon made of logistics. A weapon made of minutes saved. A weapon made of steel returning to the fight faster than the enemy could believe. Germany had built a beautiful engine. America had built time.